Three esteemed colleagues, David Feldman, come on up, at the Heller Law Firm. Used to be at Duane Morris and someone I've known for 20 years or so. Nice to see you. Jeff Schultz, my partner, come on up. I don't think there's anybody who knows more about legalization in New York than Jeff Schultz. You'll find out shortly. And Neil Kauffman, a good friend and a competitor. Here's a term I learned in cannabis when I got involved in 2013. Co-opetition. Kind of what Gene was saying before. It takes everybody to get together to do this. And so we're all competitors, but we're also all friends because we're doing this together. We're not just representing clients. We're building an industry together. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Neil to ask these fine, smart gentlemen some questions about New York legalization and federal legalization. So take it away, fellas.
Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the brief introduction, Mitch. I'm Neil Kauffman, the managing partner of Kauffman McGowan. We're one of the leading corporate cannabis law firms in the country and the state, as are my friends with me here this afternoon, Jeff and Dave. In addition to that, I'm also the former chairman of the Long Island Capital Alliance, which is also here with us today. We've helped dozens of local companies raise hundreds of millions of growth capital over the last 30 plus years. And I'm also the audit committee chairman of a couple of mutual funds. Jeff, brief bio for yourself.
Sure. I'm Jeff Schultz. I'm a partner at Forrest & Kulik. We're a New York City-based law firm with 25 attorneys. We're cannabis focused. I'd say 98% of our clients are cannabis industry operators or investors or otherwise stakeholders. I'm a corporate and securities attorney, and I focus also on cannabis regulatory issues. I'm a member of the New York State Bar Association, Cannabis Law Committee, and the New York City Cannabis Industry Association, and have a small operating business in Massachusetts. We own one retail location, and that's about it.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Dave?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm David Feldman. I'm CEO and co-founder of Skip Intro Advisors. We're here outside. We're a cannabis business consulting firm focused on finance and M&A, branding and marketing, and technology. I'm also a law partner at Hiller PC, where I do M&A and venture capital, take companies public, worked a lot in the cannabis industry since 2013, written 4 books on finance and entrepreneurship. And Friday night, when I went to see James Taylor at Jones Beach, we sat down, and right next to us was Neil. So that's why we were meant to be together on this panel. And we've been going to that Long Island group for many, many years together. So thrilled to be here, thrilled to talk about New York and federal legalization.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, that was funny. So we know you're all very interested in hearing about the legalization of recreational cannabis in New York State. We're all excited to see the legislature finally pass recreational legalization. We're all very frustrated that there has still not yet been a board established or an executive director named, much less regulations being developed as far as we know. Maybe Jeff knows better. But we'd like to start off for you with a brief summary of the structure of the statute itself so you can get a greater understanding of that, and Dave is going to take us through that.
All right, how fast can we do this? In 2017, former Governor Andrew Cuomo said cannabis was a gateway drug and it shouldn't be legalized. He was pressured in his campaign by Cynthia Nixon to change his mind on that, and he decided to support legalization. But in 2019 and 2020, the legislature couldn't come to agreement with him. Then he had this horrible scandal. His political capital was significantly reduced, so he gave in on a lot of points. And on March 31, the last day of the budget period of this year, New York passed the exciting new adult use legalization bill. So, as of this moment, you can possess up to 3 ounces of marijuana legally anywhere in New York State. You can consume marijuana anywhere where cigarette smoking is allowed, including apparently outside of this tent. The bill created the Office of Cannabis Management, which will be overseen by a cannabis control board. and the governor and the legislature appoints the members. The Office of Cannabis Management will write regulations and issue licenses. They will regulate adult use, medical, and hemp, which was previously overseen by the health and agricultural departments. And how will it work? Home grow, starting 18 months after the first dispensary, you'll be able to do home grow up to 6 mature and 6 immature plants. You can opt out. Towns and cities will be allowed to opt out. Many people believe most of Long Island, unfortunately, will opt out. But there is a provision that says if a town or city opts out, the voters can vote in a referendum to overrule that decision to opt out.
And Dave, if I may, just to clarify, they're allowed to opt out for retail and consumption lounges, not for cultivation or manufacturing.
Correct. The opt-out only applies to retail. Hold on.
And they have to opt out by the end of this year. If they don't opt out by then, they're stuck.
Right. They have to opt out by December 31st. So taxation is, we're going to have the first in the country tax based on the level of THC. We can go into that if you want. The licensing fees are going to be determined in the future. There's a projection of about $450 million in revenues. There's going to be funds set aside for different good purposes. The licenses that will be granted include adult use cultivator, processor, co-op, distributor, dispensary, microbusiness, delivery, and nursery. The licenses will be for 2 years. There will be a limit on how many licenses you can own, including 3 retail licenses only. There will be no vertical integration permitted. You cannot own retail and consumption lounge at the same time. And only the existing medical marijuana licensees will allow to stay vertical. The CCB, Cannabis Control Board, will be able to regulate advertising and branding, and there will be social equity provisions. There are in the regulations. There is a goal in the bill of awarding 50% of adult use licenses to social and economic equity applicants, which include minority and women-owned businesses, distressed farmers, and disabled veterans, all very worthwhile groups. And any conviction of something that would be legal today is automatically expunged. You don't have to go get an expungement. It's going to be automatic. This is mostly focused on possession-type convictions. So what's happening now, we can talk about it, but Cuomo was slow-walking the appointment of all the people, and now we have the new governor, and we can have our conversation about that.
Right. So I don't know anybody who follows the politics better than Jeff. Jeff, can you share with us whatever you can about, rumors you're hearing, any developments, what really might be going on in Albany, because it doesn't seem like a lot has been going on.
No, it's pretty frustrating for you, for me, for everybody, right? But I think there's been some good news. I was relieved when the governor decided to resign for several reasons, cannabis being one of them, obviously. So we have a new governor. She seems significantly more receptive to getting this program off the ground, finally. The governor was playing games, and he's gone. So we now have a new governor who has been pretty vocal about it. She does have a lot of problems and a lot of other priorities to deal with, but she's from Buffalo. Crystal Peoples-Stokes, who's one of the primary sponsors of this bill, is also from Buffalo. I think they have a good relationship. They certainly have a better relationship with the former governor, who, as far my understanding, didn't speak to anybody. So I think that there's a little bit more communication and should speed things up a little bit here. I'm hearing that within as early as the next 2 weeks, we could start to see those appointments. We do need lawmakers to go back to Albany to confirm those appointments. They need a reason to go back there. They're on recess till January, okay? So they got to come back, whether it's to appoint the head of the MTA or other very good reasons. Maybe it's an extension of the eviction moratorium, but they need to go back to Albany for some reason, and hopefully that happens this month. And then, then maybe we can get some regs.
Right, so that'll kick it off, and then how long do you think it'll take from when the control board is filled to we have an executive director and maybe start seeing some indication of what the regulations might look like?
So I think my understanding is we're going to see all those board appointments roughly around the same time. I'm hopeful. I think at least lawmakers want this done a little faster maybe than the governor's office. I don't know if the regs are being written behind closed doors right now. I suspect that there is some movement there. So I don't think that we're starting from scratch. I have faith in certain individuals in the governor's office who understand that they can learn from 18 other states at this point, and don't need to totally reinvent the wheel. But New Yorkers will be New Yorkers, and will put their own touch on it.
And one very important piece of advice, if you are thinking about applying for a license in New York, do not wait. Get started now. Because if we see what happened, for example, in New Jersey, they just dropped their regulations last week, and they basically said there's going to be a 30-day window to send in your application starting 30 days from now. If you're first getting started then, you are too late. You've got to line up your real estate, line up your financing, line up your people, write your business plan, and now is the time to get started. Now, I'm hoping Jeff is right that things are going to happen sooner rather than later. I think I'm a little less optimistic than maybe you are. I think the new governor has a lot on her plate. She has a lot of priorities. She's got to create her cabinet, and she's doing all of it while the legislature is out of town. I think it's going to be more like 3 months before the state agency is in place, and then they've got to hire staff that's going to write the regs, which I think is going to take another 3 months. I hope I'm wrong, and it happens sooner. So I really do hope I'm wrong, and I've been wrong before. I predicted they were going to pass it in 2019 and 2020. So don't listen to me.
But we've seen this everywhere else, right? It never goes as planned, right? So anybody who thinks it's going to happen right on time and as certain lawmakers say it will be, it's not. It just there's no precedent for that. Those appointments, once they happen, there's a question as to how quickly we see the regs after those appointments. I think it might be a little quicker. I think that that's being done behind closed doors. They can at least get a public draft out. Long and short of it is, once the state releases the first draft of the comments, there's going to be 2 notice and comment periods. It's 5 months from beginning to end. So the date that they're released, you got 5 months until they're final. But you raised a really good point. What's happening in New Jersey, it's moving real quick. So it's a lot of hurry up. It's the opposite of hurry up and wait. It's going to go a little slow, and then it's going to pick up really fast. And if I've had people say to me, well, let's start when the app drops. Like, it's way too late for that.
Right. I was just going to say one last point. What they might do, like Jersey, is pass immediately effective interim rules that are subject to future comment and change. And you could then, they did this with hemp, where they did interim rules. You could send in your application, even though the rules and the form of application could change. And they may do that again here.
Well, and that's the great balancing act, right? Because Dave, you're right. You want to start as soon as you can and be as prepared as possible. But how do you balance that with not knowing what the regulations are going to require?
I'll tell you how. We already know, how far from a church, how far from a school. We know pretty much which counties are likely to opt out if you're thinking about a retail
And we'll know
dispenser.
by 12/31 which ones are out for retail.
And we'll know by 12/31 anyway. And you can start lining up that real estate opportunity. You can definitely get financing. You don't have to put money in the bank. You just have to get real people with real money who say, if you get a license, I promise in a legally binding way to give you this money. You can write a business plan, and you can put your team together. All those things you're going to need to do almost regardless of what the regulations say.
And one other critical thing, what do you guys think about this? Start building your team and make it as diverse as possible.
Now, right? That starts now. And those negotiations can take a while. If you're starting a fresh business, you have to put the whole team together. These things don't happen overnight. Even when you get people to agree to join the team as partners or advisors, there's a contract. You're going to appoint people. There's a whole negotiation around that. What are they getting paid? Is it cash? Is it equity? What does that look like? It doesn't happen that quickly if you're doing it right. So I agree. The real estate portion, it starts there.
But that's expensive.
But this,
right? To buy or lease real estate and carry it for 2 years is expensive.
or take a long-term option. And this is why the folks that are getting started who have a leg up right now are the people who are already in real estate, who own real estate, or who are very close with people in the real estate industry. And we saw this in many other states as well. The folks in real estate got in, and they got in early, and they got in quickly. But on your social equity point, it is very important to have a diverse team. You don't want everyone looking like us, and our day, has passed. And so it's awesome that we need maximum amount of diversity. However, I have told people I will not participate if what you're doing is kind of tokenism and bringing in somebody who is a minority just to stand there and do nothing. That is not how this is supposed to work. You want real partners who are going to be really active, really involved, who really know what they're doing, and then you'll have a real chance to succeed.
And that's embedded in the bill in the MRTA. There's language around social equity ownership, around real, substantial, and ongoing operational control over that asset for that minority or women individual or group of owners. So you can't fake it. You can't have this straw man set up. And I'd agree with you. Not only would we not take that client on principle, but they're not going to win. The state is smart enough to see through that, and you're going to be.
I hope so.
You're going to have to re-up your application, right? It's going to be up for renewal in 2 years, and if you haven't lived up to the promises in your application that you've told the state that you would do all these things, or if the ownership structures change in a way that is no longer within the spirit of those social equity regs, you're not going to get renewed. So, anyone thinking about a plan to put a cardboard cutout of a minority or a woman as your business leader, and then get rid of it the day you win, good luck.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how deeply the regulations go into that, and how the department will view that whole structure, as well as how they're going to view, I think, the return of the New York diaspora, which I'm seeing a lot of. New Yorkers that have fanned out across the country to the West Coast and elsewhere over the last several years, learned the industry, and are now coming back home to run cannabis businesses in their home neighborhoods. I think that's going to be really fascinating to see how the bureaucracy manages that. Let's hope they don't screw it up like they did the first time around.
There is no question that New York is going to be one of the new critical epicenters of this industry going forward. It's going to happen. So California is going to remain very important, but New York and the Northeast is going to be one of the key centers going forward.
Right. If I could just say one or two things. So the New York statute is in many ways very intelligently designed. It's got some fundamental flaws, we'll touch on in a second, but on a lot of levels, like the THC tax and some other things, having a completely integrated regulatory structure for recreational, medical, and hemp, all in one, brilliant, forward-thinking structure. However, we come across the vertical integration problem, where in the desire to try to build a sort of an industry of small participants, structuring the cannabis industry like the liquor industry, in the thought that we'll have a bunch of mom and pop retail cannabis dispensaries without really thinking through, in my view at least, that it's a lot harder to run a cannabis dispensary than it is to run a liquor store. What are your guys' views on that?
A lot more moms than pops, but it is a very progressive bill. I think that they're light years ahead of most other states in trying to ban vertical integration, the ROs notwithstanding, because and I don't know if we're going to get to this, but if you can tie that into the CAOA, the discussion draft from Schumer and Wyden and Booker, the section 304 of the CAOA also,
we're going to get to that in a minute.
Also, it also bans vertical integration. There's a no tiered house provision there, which is something we'll talk about later, but the New York bill as written would flow very nicely with that federal bill, even though it's not going to pass.
One of the big disappointments for me in this bill was the fact that marijuana is going to be regulated by the Liquor Authority. I don't understand that. The two are completely different. They should not be regulated the same. This is medicine. This is, something that helps people. It should be treated very differently. And my concern is they're going to treat it like liquor and regulate it like liquor as if it's something bad and evil that needs to be controlled. And we're going to have to keep an eye on that.
Thanks, guys. So the other big thing that everyone is always concerned about with cannabis is federal illegality. And there have been some rumblings in Washington, now that Mitch McConnell doesn't control the entire city anymore, about the possibility of some type of federal legalization or federalist type solution to federal illegality for cannabis. Dave, you want to give us a little summary of what's proposed in Washington?
All right. So as we know, Chuck Schumer and Cory Booker put together, with a lot of other help, the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act, which weighs in at 163 pages. Public comment ends this week, technically, September 1st. There are 5 key pillars to the Schumer bill. It federally deschedules cannabis, which must be done within 60 days. And everyone has to be 21. It expunges prior convictions for nonviolent marijuana offenses. It allows people under a current sentence to petition for resentencing, which is one of the controversial features that you have to go petition. It maintains the authority of states to opt out and choose not to allow legal adult use, but it does not stop the ability of trucks to come through with adult use product to go from one legal state to another. And it removes collateral consequences like immigration-related penalties for people who have been criminalized over the plant, as well as national security. Taxes are very high. They start at 10%. They go up to 25%. There's an alphabet soup of regulatory agencies that's going to regulate cannabis, including it moves from the DEA to the FDA, the ATF, the TTB, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and so on. There are going to be grant programs. There are going to be fewer penalties for federal employees. Vapes will not be allowed to add natural or artificial flavors. Hemp will still be treated as an exception to cannabis. Several things are still unresolved, like international treaty issues. Technically, we're not really allowed to do this under certain treaties. How to regulate synthetic THC is unresolved. And they have to decide if pre-market review of products will be necessary. So that's a brief overview of the Schumer bill.
So, Dave, do you read this statute as permitting interstate commerce expressly, or can states put up their own bars to that?
It permits interstate commerce. However, it would not allow
Maybe it already does.
Yes. It would not allow. It would allow a state to prohibit growing, processing, and selling in your state, but they would not be able to stop, product moving through.
But if a state wants to preserve all the infrastructure that has been built in their state, so for example, Michigan, right? Cold, wet state, not the greatest place or the most efficient place to grow cannabis, right? But if Michigan decides they want to protect their domestic cannabis industry, can they ban interstate shipments into their state? Or is it not clear?
They can't tax it into oblivion. You cannot just issue a tariff on out-of-state cannabis imports, at 80%. That's unconstitutional. What they can do, and what's interesting, and we can take a cue from the New York hemp rules and regs, they can. You can conform your rules. So the hemp regs in New York are very interesting, right? Everything has to, anything grown in the state has to meet very, very high standards for cultivation, packaging, testing, et cetera, right? And what it also says is if you're gonna ship in any CBD from out of the state, it has to meet the exact same standards as you do in New York. That is constitutional. So if you set the bar as high as anybody else in the country, you protect it to some extent, but you can't completely stop it.
Okay.
So you're not going to get, you're going to get products that are maybe not grown in a CGMP facility.
If that's how it's passed, then I
it's
guess we'll
gotta be
see what, if anything, passes.
correct. So that's one way to do it that's legal. So I think the two, to cut to the core of it, there's a couple things. One, this bill has no shot of passing. I can say that with a lot of confidence. They don't have 60 votes. That said, it's really, really important for us as a community and an industry to take part in this conversation, because if you're not part of the conversation now, you're going to have no impact. This has now become a national conversation at a national level around all of the policy implications of federal legalization, and they're very deep and very wide.
And one of the things I always say is you can't get something done the fourth try until you have the first try. And so nobody really expects that this is likely to pass soon or in its current form, because it needs 10 Republican senators. That it seems like there's no likelihood of that, and even less likelihood that they would get rid of the filibuster just for this. However, it's the first time that the Senate leadership stood up and said, we want to legalize cannabis. Unfortunately, we have a president who really doesn't want to legalize. He has said all he wants to do is decriminalize. So that is an impediment, as well as the fact that we don't have enough Republican senators to approve it. But we've talked about this earlier, that I think Jeff Finkel was talking about this. Once a majority of the states in this country have approved adult use, we think that's when this is more likely to happen. Plus, we've talked about the Supreme Court and what they may do here. We can talk about that if you want.
And the concept of decriminalizing cannabis and not regulating it contemporaneously is crazy. That's what New York has done today. right? We've decriminalized it. So all you need to do is go walk through Times Square, and it's a farmer's market for drugs. I don't know if anybody's done this. I've done it. It's near my office. You've got people lined up outside in broad daylight selling all kinds of trap brands all over the place. It's wild, and no one knows what it is.
You can buy it from Elmo.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's terrible. It's not a good. So you have to regulate it. The other thing I'd say that I don't think gets a lot of attention on this bill. One is interstate commerce. I think everybody likes to talk about that. It's a section that's being overlooked. Section 304 is one that I mentioned earlier. It bans vertical integration, right? So that's going to have meaningful implications if the bill passed that way. What does that mean for states that permit vertical integration, and what does it mean for states like Florida that require it?
And for all the big MSOs.
And
I
for
mean,
everybody.
talk about destroying the business model.
Correct.
So let's touch briefly on something that Jeff and Matt talked about, which is the prospects of the Safe Banking Act or some other similar type of solution to the capital markets problem. Because I think we'd all love to see NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange being able to list cannabis stocks and institutional capital coming into the marketplace. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
We do, right? We all want that. I've been hammering on that for 2+ years. But the other thing that's happening here is you have minorities, small business owners, minorities and women who are raising money, especially in New York. It is really, really, really difficult to raise money in this industry because look at where you have to do it. You got to do it out here. And people are concerned
East
about...
Hampton's a great place.
Exactly. And people are concerned rightfully over the white male dominance of investment and ownership in this industry. If you want to fix those problems, and they're both very closely related, you need to allow for access to capital. What does safe banking do? It's not going to blow the doors open on this thing, but it's going to lower the cost of capital and make it a little bit easier to achieve some of the goals in the CAOA, especially the ones that Cory Booker, who said he would roll over and die before this thing passed, before SAFE passed, I don't think understands that safe banking will actually help them.
Right. So what Cory Booker said, to quote, he said he will lay myself down to block any senators who want to pass safe banking. Not because he doesn't want safe banking, because he believes that it would interfere with getting legalization done. And also he believes that this will just put more money into big banks' coffers. Frankly, I think it would put more money into the pockets of small operators who are paying enormous fees to banks right now in order just to open a checking account. And if that could be eliminated by getting rid of a lot of this oversight, that could be very dramatic. And so many feel that could be a great interim step. And by the way, the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ allow ancillary businesses to get listed, but not companies that touch the plant. There is no legal reason for them to make that distinction. They are covered by, the various FinCEN guidelines that have come out and so on that say, you can take this on, you could do it. And when I speak to the folks at the exchanges, they say, we know we can do it, we're just not ready. We just don't want to. And there's no, enforcement worry, there's no reputational worry. And I think I agree with you that safe banking could be the trigger that would allow them to cross that threshold.
As long as it says it.
They just need to attach it to a must-pass bill. The last thing I'll say about that, it's probably not going to pass as a standalone, but it's got a shot, and we do need to see some sort of, contemporaneous social justice reform with that. And I think we're more likely to see that out of the White House, the DOJ, than through legislation.
Well, maybe that's a possible compromise. So we're kind of running out of time.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one last thing, which is one thing that hasn't been really discussed is something that over 30 countries have already done, which we could consider, but for some reason has not happened. And that is, let's federally legalize medical marijuana. That I think would be non-controversial in my opinion. I don't think it would stand in the way of adult use eventually becoming legal, and that is something we should be considering.
Okay, well, thank you, Dave, for that closing thought. Jeff, any closing thoughts?
No, that's it. That's fantastic. I just want to address your question real quick about why would the federal government ban vertical integration? They literally cribbed the provision in the CAOA from another bill called the Federal Alcohol Administration Act without thinking what the hell they were doing, right? Oh, this looks close enough. Let's take that and put it over here in the bill. It's literally identical. They just changed alcohol to cannabis. and
Yeah.
don't realize, look, alcohol industry was vertically integrated for a very short period of time after Prohibition also.
So look, don't worry, it's not passed. Nothing's passing. Don't need to panic yet. But we want to thank you all for your attention.
Thank
and
you,
your
everybody.
time. Thank you to Dave and Jeff. And we're all looking forward to the next steps in the legalization of cannabis.